Timothy Dexter is the true definition of dumb luck. If life were an RPG, he rolled a 1 in intelligence but went full on luck maxing. He made business decisions that would have bankrupted anyone else, but instead it made him richer. And he did that over and over again. Let me tell you a bit about his background. He had a classic rags to riches backstory. He was born in 1747 to a poor family, and he didn't have much education because he dropped out of school when he was 8 to work as a farm laborer. When he was 22, he moved to Newburyport, Massachusetts, where he met a 32-year-old rich widow whom he then married. With the newly acquired wealth through marriage, he bought a mansion and set up a shop in the basement selling moose hide trousers, gloves, hides, and whale blubber. Apparently whale blubber was used for oil lamps, candles, and margarine. I can't believe it's not blubber. An early example of his improbable success was buying continental currency. For context, continental currency was money issued by the US government to fund the Revolutionary War. It was basically an IOU, but the US government printed so much of it by the end of the war, it was practically worthless. So much so, when the war was over, the US government made good on its notes, but only at 1% of face value, meaning if you had $100 worth of continental currency, they'll pay you $1 for that. Dexter had a lot of those. Bad investment, right? Probably bankrupted him. Wrong. That's because Massachusetts paid its own notes at par, meaning if you have $100 worth of continental currency, they'll buy that back for $100. And since Dexter bought the continental currency for cheap, he made a fortune. So that's basically like buying Bitcoin in 2010. And just like any good crypto bro would, he bought boats, which marked the start of his bizarre but successful export business to Europe and the West Indies. Because he was largely uneducated, his business sense was considered peculiar, and because people thought that he was a bit dumb, his competitors tried to troll him a little bit. They told him to send bed warmers, or warming pans, to the West Indies. Since no one uses bed warmers today, let me explain what it actually is. Think of a pan that people use to put coal in and then put on the bed to make it warm before you use it. It used to be a common household item in places that has cold winters, and if you're not familiar with the West Indies, think the Bahamas, a place that's popular for its tropical beaches and not for its cold winters because it doesn't have any. His rivals probably thought they were pretty clever with that until they realized that he made a massive fortune because his ship captain sold them as ladles to the local molasses industry. And I'm not sure if his rivals weren't satisfied and tried to give him another ridiculous advice, or if Dexter came up with the idea himself, probably thinking since he can sell bed warmers to the West Indies, maybe he can also sell wool mittens to the locals. And obviously the locals didn't buy it because it's a tropical place. It's hot already, silly. But there were Asian merchants there that bought the mittens for export to Siberia, so he profits again. Later on, someone tried to troll him again by telling him to sell gloves to the South Sea Island, which is also a tropical island that doesn't need gloves. But his ship arrived just in time to come across a Portuguese ship that bought the gloves to sell to China. Selling coal to Newcastle was an Old English saying that meant doing something pointless because Newcastle's main export was coal, so it's pretty useless, kind of like trying to salt the ocean or sell methamphetamine to Walter White. People told him to ship coal to Newcastle as a joke. He took it seriously. He sent a shipment of coal and he lucked out again, because when the shipment got there, it turns out the miners were on strike, therefore cutting supply, and the demand is still high. So again, he made a fortune from that. It doesn't say this anywhere, but I like to imagine that the people in Massachusetts were annoyed with the amount of stray cats walking around, and they also wanted to troll Dexter, so they said, let's make Dexter sell it. And that's just what he did. He exported stray cats to the Caribbean islands. Now at the time, the Caribbean islands suffered from a rat infestation, so the cats were welcomed as a solution. Honestly, the more I read about him, the more genius he sounds. Now people made fun of him and his decisions, but all of the haters can't say anything because all this time they've been trying to make him fail, but all they did was help him win. So what do you do when you won so many times? You flex, and that's exactly what Dexter did. He got himself a mansion, and he decorated that mansion with minarets, a golden eagle on top of a cupola, and a mausoleum for himself. even though he's still alive. And for whatever reason, he got a garden with 40 wooden statues of famous men, including George Washington, Napoleon, Thomas Jefferson, and of course, himself. And on his statue, there's the inscription, "I am the first in the East, I am the first in the West, and I am the greatest philosopher in the Western world." I don't really understand how philosophy got into the picture. I mean, if he were boasting, "I'm the greatest businessman in the Western world," that makes a lot of sense. But then again, a lot of things about Timothy Dexter doesn't make sense, so... Anyway, even though things were doing great for him business-wise, not everything in his life was smooth sailing. He unfortunately did not have a good relationship with his family. Guests would come over and he would tell those guests that his wife died, even though she's still alive. And if the guests said they've seen his wife walking around the house, he simply says, "Oh, that's her ghost." At some point, Dexter faked his own death to see how many people cared, and about 3,000 people attended his mock wake. He returned from his fake death angry and started to beat his wife with a cane because apparently she didn't cry, which probably spooked some folks, but ultimately revealed the hoax. He's not actually dead. Anyway, eventually Dexter became famous for being this eccentric figure in town. See, if you're rich, you're eccentric. If you're poor, you're weird. And he's also famous for wanting to hold public office. He probably thought that the city has given him so much, it's probably time to give something back in return. So he did what any aspiring politician would do. He started spamming the local officials with petitions to nominate him for public office. I think at some point they got sick of dealing with Dexter, so they eventually gave him what he wanted. In March 1776, Dexter was given the prestigious position of Informer of Deer. What does an Informer of Deer do, one might ask? Well, they inform the townspeople when there's a deer. Hello everyone, there is a deer. And even though Dexter was said to have been content with and proud of his position, he never actually got to say those words for the 12 years he was in office. Because there were no deer in Newburyport area. He might as well have been informer of penguins in the Gobi Desert. But it made him happy, so good for him, I guess. After his successful political career, he decided to write a book called A Pickle for the Knowing Ones, in which he complained about politicians, the clergy, and his wife. The book contains 8,847 words and 33,864 letters, but without any punctuation and with unorthodox spelling and capitalization. One section begins with, "I'm the First Lord in the United States of A. Mercary, now of Newburyport. It is the voice of the people, and I can't help it, and so let it go." And even with this crappy book, he achieved success because the first edition was meant to be given out for free, but it became so popular he ended up reprinting it 8 times. And because so many people complain about how there's a lack of punctuation, making it really hard to read, on the second edition onwards, he printed one whole page full of punctuations, basically telling the readers to just put the punctuations wherever it's necessary. It's a DIY punctuation mark. That is brilliant. Or in his words, "They may pepper and salt it as they please." You can actually read his book at Gutenberg.org. It's actually there. That's crazy. I'll leave the link in the description or in the comment section for you to read. I tried reading his book, but I am so confused. And I don't really know, does he actually sign his name under every page? Okay, I think I can read one passage. "I'm the First Lord in the United States of Americary, now of Newburyport. It is the voice of the people, and I can't help it, and so let it go. Now as I must be Lord, there will be fuller many more lords pretty soon for it. Don't hurt a cat, nor the mouse, nor the sun, nor the water, nor the ear. Then go on all in easy now." Shakespeare's got nothing on this guy. Just like any other man, Dexter died in 1806. For real this time. Many people that knew him considered him very unintelligent. His obituary read, his intellectual endowments not being of the most exalted stamp. That's just a fancy old English way to call him smooth-brained. But Dexter didn't leave without cementing his legacy. He hired an amateur poet, which also happens to sell fish, to make a poem for him that goes, "Lord Dexter is a man of fame, most celebrated is his name, more precious far than gold that's pure, Lord Dexter shines forevermore." That last part didn't really rhyme, but okay, I guess. The question I have about Timothy Dexter is, was he actually an idiot that got really lucky that everyone claims he is? Or was he actually a misunderstood genius? Because how lucky could one be to be lucky so many times in a row? I guess if there's something that we can learn from Timothy Dexter is that maybe some ideas that everyone laughs at are actually worth trying. Who knows? Maybe you just need a little bit of luck.